I'm pretty sure I can still hear Sarah.
You're funny, Chris.
Time there under the USD, under the school district. The testing center there was offering 9 Pearson or ETS sponsored exams, equaling approximately 145 unique exams offered by those 2 companies. And the time that they have been here on the campus of Manhattan Tech, that has grown considerably to 66 sponsored exams from various different vendors now and companies that we're partnered with, and over 1,400 unique exams that are actually available through these sponsors now on our campus. And the Achievement Center and our Teaching and Learning Center, which would be our student testing, the Regional Test Center would be our professional testing, licensing exams, things like that. But our Achievement Center would, where we handle all of our student testing. Between kind of that same time frame, we've administered approximately 3,800 individual exams, and this includes a period between March and July where exams either weren't administered or were only done remotely. And we're finally again kind of this semester seeing that increased need for on-campus testing via a third-party applicants. So students not associated with Manhattan Tech, but who need a student testing center to go to have tests administered. So last year that was pretty much non-existent, or for about the last semester, 2 semesters. But we're seeing that increase again. This is just a brief graphical breakdown of the information I just covered. Again, sponsored exams and unique exams here offered through the Regional Testing Center. Again, those years between 2015 and 2018, the end of their time in the school district. And then again, so we've got our sponsored exams, our unique exams, and you can see again the increase in how much that really is percentage-wise. Over 600% increase in the available sponsored exams, and almost 900% with the unique exams that are available at our testing center, which is considerable considering its size, which is rather small. In 2017, the final full year under the school district, 552 tests were administered through the testing center, the professional testing center. In 2019, which was the first full year here with Manhattan Tech, and they administered over 600. And in 2020, thus far, or towards the end of 2020, that this does not. I don't think this includes December yet, because I think I asked Cindy to give me numbers before that. But over 900 tests have been administered, and this includes us being closed for 60 days because of COVID restrictions. So we can see that those numbers are pretty good. It's a pretty steady increase as well, and this year is not slowing down. So the proposal we submitted earlier was in regard to combining our testing services under one roof, essentially creating a unique testing center for Manhattan Tech and for our community and our surrounding communities. This is just a quick drop, kind of overhead view of something that is a potential, and only a potential. And what we can see here is combining our professional testing along with our student testing under one roof, into one area, and kind of why would we want to be doing this? Why is this a good idea? What advantages does it give us? So having this under, I've made some bullet points, but I will go over those. Combining these services, professional student testing services, does make it a little bit easier for us to manage. It also allows us to expand again, continue to expand what we're doing and what we're able to offer, not just our students, but our community and our surrounding community, our service area. We are more square footage allows us to increase our seating numbers, because right now in the regional testing center and in our student testing center, we're doing about half capacity of what we would normally be able to do. And the truth is we don't know if that will change, at least not anytime soon. So having a larger square footage allows us to increase seat numbers, to allow for more testing, more larger test sessions, and still to be safe, still be able to have individuals spaced effectively, and be able to again administer these things in a safe environment. We would like to see the addition of private testing rooms for accommodations, and also there are certain tests that we'd like to be able to begin offering that require a private testing room, and in a certain setup, of which we have a difficulty accommodating currently. Larger lobby areas, storage areas, again, larger waiting areas, again, being able to safely have people, that are waiting to check in, waiting for their test. Um, more security lockers for personal belongings. That's always a necessity. One thing we do currently in both areas is we are making sure that we are sanitizing our workspaces, our testing rooms very regularly. And so, just because we would have a larger footprint, a larger areas, more square footage, that won't change, because that's something that just has to continue in order for us to be effective. Again, the larger testing rooms will allow us to space out effectively and still allow us to increase the number of individuals we could test at any one time. Multiple testing rooms in a single location also allows us to be a bit more responsive to a community. We can be very flexible, much more flexible than other testing centers in our area, because we're not hampered by certain things. So, if there's a specialized training or a test that a company or a business needs us to provide to them, we can do that, and we can still and we can still offer our testing, our scheduled testing, our normal testing. It doesn't affect us if we have, because we would have the rooms and the flexibility available to do that. And then the increased benefit to both Manhattan Tech, our community in Manhattan Tech, our students, and then also our county service area. Riley and Pottawatomie counties especially, but we do stretch out. We have people coming from as far west as Great Bend and Garden City, and as far up north as Omaha, Nebraska, to our testing center, because we have some of the things that we offer that aren't offered in closer proximity. So the ability to continue to do that and to increase that benefits us, and of course that does also help us raise revenue. The purpose of this, primarily is also to become sustainable and to increase the revenue of the testing center, both on the professional side, and there are some things that we charge for third-party testing with related to students as well. So being able to show that we are a benefit, and I think we have shown, especially with the regional testing center, the things Cindy's done have been amazing, and that's not slowing down anytime soon. But we are running out of space, and so that is our concern. But anyways, that's it as far as that presentation goes. Just some quick things that I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of and familiar with. And I will stop that. There you go.
And can you give an example of some of the unique testing that is done?
Sure. We have a pretty good partnership with U.S. Engineering, for instance. They have a few times a year, they have employees that need a Montana State boiler certification done. And we have pipeline to that, so to speak. Which is nice. We actually just recently, these past 2 weeks, we had employees from Stormont Vale out of Topeka in our student testing center, using it as a training room because it was available, and we were able to be flexible enough to move things around to accommodate still accommodate our students and to have them here and use our take advantage of our space, which they're very appreciative of. So those are two really good examples, I think. And so that's it. And I know Cindy might have some others, I'm not sure, but those are some pretty good examples.
Thank you.
I had to take my contractor's exam here. For instance, like Pearson View,
Mhm.
if we grew that footprint, what is their benefit? I mean, do we charge them more for the more students or the more people to take tests, take exams?
No, the contract, ICC, I'm assuming that's the contractor test you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, ICC is a volume-based test. So it's a set fee that they pay us. It actually benefits the community because because I had one in today, currently we are the only Pearson View that is open and running in our side of the state.
Yes, if we were able to expand our footprint, if we were able to get them a little more space, then yes, we can offer more. The seat size was the same as it is, but we would be able to increase because right now we're using the room to provide other testing. If we were able to have basically we're wanting to add a third room. Right now they're in a 2-room space. If we were able to eventually get them a third room, we could move some of that testing out, do just Pearson View testing, and it would allow us to offer more tests, which then would bring in more revenue into the institution, but then provide more services. Part of the presentation that I was wanting Darren and Cindy to do was to kind of show you guys that being where they originally were, they were kind of limited on what they were able to do with the size that they had. And then once they came here and they had 2 full rooms that they could utilize, they were able to grow over 600% on what they were offering. And I have to give kudos to Cindy because she kind of came in when she came on board and was like, hey, I think we can do these other things. And I'm like, go for it. Yes. And so I kind of just let her go. And she would come in and educate me on the different tests. And we've been doing tests, everything from like FBI and what else?
Secret Service.
Aviation.
This month is TSA, and also we have already met our contract obligation for FAA, which that's one thing you guys need to take credit for, because there's a construction company, and I'm sorry, I haven't found out the name yet. I will find it out, who still thought we were VOTEC. And when we started giving FAA, I have had so many of them come in and thank us for doing everything we're doing for the community. So it's very gratifying at times for the test.
She's grown it.
Yes. Do we have any other numbers for the revenue that this generates?
So we do have them, and I don't have them for you today, and I apologize. I was out of town until yesterday for about 3 weeks. So I've been out of the office, but I would be glad to give that to you. And I think we were planning on next month providing you more information on the proposal, which would include all of the revenue. We just didn't have it today. And just to add with Darren and Cindy and how great they've done with this, their proposal that they've talked about is something we will present to you, but having a regional testing center, having its own unit, currently it was kind of part of the ALC, but not. Now the proposal is really to make it its own entity because they've been able to grow at 600%. And so now we're looking at making this its own entity, self-sustaining and things of that nature. So they've done just such a great job. We're like, wow, we're grown out of everything. So
Darren, tell the board a little bit about what our pipe dream is, kind of once we kind of brand this off and get this its own entity? What is our big ultimate dream?
Sure. I
with it?
mean, our goal with everything is to be completely sustainable. We, honestly, some of the things I've talked with Sarah about is that ability to for us to not have to be funded by the college at all. Now that's a hefty goal, but it is possible. It's possible given the numbers, and as they keep increasing. The biggest thing is we're not tied to certain things like other institutions are. We don't have, so we can be as flexible to the community as we need to be, and that's the goal for me and Cindy. The thing that we've talked about is we want to make sure that the community is aware that we're here, and that we're a better option, honestly. And that takes time, and oftentimes marketing and things like that. But I think we've done a pretty good job. Anytime somebody comes from a location where we haven't had them before to take a test that could be one that we don't give often, we're actually sending them back as a marketing tool for us. We're letting them know that, hey, tell your colleagues about us. Let them know, have them get in touch with us. Is there something we can offer? We're trying to make it so that for our students, for instance, that a nursing student, a student can start here as a nursing student and walk out having done all their coursework and tested for their license on our campus. We'd like to see that in several different areas, but it takes time to convince these certain, some of the companies, especially, that we could do that, and how much it benefits not just our students and our campus, but then our community, because they, as we've heard many times before, our students stick around in our community. They're not graduating from university and then going off someplace. They're sticking around in our service area, and to have them know that they can always come back to Manhattan Tech and say, you know what, I can go back there and get this certification. I can go back there and get this license testing done. That's one of my, main, purposes with this, as well as becoming more and more visible in our community for our professional testing purposes. So, I think it's a lofty goal, but it's also a reachable goal. It's attainable, and it's, it may be, a few years, but it's attainable. That's really the kind of the main sticking point.
Well, thanks. We really appreciate the presentation. Look forward to more information from you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, next we have another presentation.
You do, and this one will be with our Director of Financial Aid. I don't see Cicely, so will it be you tonight, Laura? Oh, she's here. Okay. Laura is our Director of Financial Aid, and Cicely is also on. She is our financial aid counselor, and they're going to present to you an update to our student loan default rate. And if you would, when you start to present, could you explain what that is as well, ladies?
Of course we can. That is part of the plan.
Fantastic. Take it away, Laura.
Okay. Do you like my hold music while I pull up my slides? Sure. Okay, so I'm Laura Weiss-Cook. I'm the Director of Financial Aid, and I am going to start off by talking to you about what default is when it comes to financial aid, and then why it's important. And then Cicely is going to take over and talk a little bit about what we do to work with students to help keep that rate low. Okay. So default from a financial aid perspective is really when that student becomes 270 days delinquent on their student loans. Okay, this has nothing to do with Pell Grants. This only has to do with Title IV federal student loans for the most part. Private loans can go into default as well, but that's a little different. The consequences are very different. So first, as those of you who are familiar with financial tools know, the first step would be that they go into delinquency. They become past due on their loan. They're not making payments. Maybe they're not making full payments. For the purposes of what we're talking about, we're really going to go hard into the default. There are things we can do while they're just delinquent, but default is where the real issues lie. Okay, when a student takes out a student loan, they sign a master promissory note, which lays out the terms of their repayment. It's that legal binding document that they have an agreement with the federal government through the Department of Education, specifically the Federal Student Aid Office, to repay that according to the terms set forth. As I said, default happens when that student is 270 days delinquent on their loans. And then once they have gone into default, the federal government has a pretty hefty tool bag of what they can do in order to get those funds back from the student, former student, graduate, what have you. Let's see, some of those things that the federal government can do include, garnishing your wages, withholding funds from your tax refund, all kinds of things that only a government agency really has the power to do. If a student does go into default, it's not the end of the road. It's not the only thing that they ever have to look forward to in life. There are ways to rehabilitate that. They can make a series of payments for, I want to say, 6 months and get back in good grace. They can pay the loan off in full, but that's a little more unlikely because if you're behind in payments, you're probably not likely to have the whole amount just to pay. And you can also do some loan consolidation. The federal government has some tools to kind of combine all of those student loans together into a different loan. So then those original loans are made current because they've been paid off. That does help tremendously. So it doesn't, magically fix all of their financial issues, but there are ways to rectify that default. If a student does have a private loan through a private loan company like a Sallie Mae or a Wells Fargo, or through their local bank, who often use one of those larger companies, they can be in default with those too. But that is primarily an issue between them and that private loan company. The federal government has no role in that process. Let's see. So when we talk about default from a financial aid perspective or from an institutional perspective, there's a number of reasons why that's important, why we care so much about it. Obviously, number one, we don't want our students to go into default because that is not a good look for anybody, and it doesn't benefit the student at all. It makes it harder for them, to do a whole lot of things because it impacts their credit score. Like I said, there's lots of ways those wages or tax returns or what have you can be garnished, but also that cohort default rate impacts us as an institution because that cohort default rate can determine whether or not, number one, the institution can give federal financial aid, or there could be sanctions against the school. For instance, if an institution has a higher than 30% cohort default rate for 3 years in a row, then the institution has to follow a very specific cohort or default rate management plan. It impacts when the school can disperse aid. It impacts whether or not the school has to how their cash management process with the Department of Education works. That's a simpler way of saying that. So let's explain exactly how a cohort default rate is calculated. Okay, so a few years back, the Department of Education moved to a 3-year cohort default rate. So it will look at the percentage of those student borrowers that entered repayment during a specific fiscal year. So right now, ironically, just this week, we got our unofficial draft version of our 2018 cohort default rate. And it looks at those folks in 2018 who entered repayment. And then it looks at a 3-year period after that to see if they went into default during that period. Does that make sense? So it calculates that information that it receives back from the federal loan servicers who work to manage all of the Department of Education's loans. So the money all comes from the Department of Education, but there are separate private entities that have contracts like Great Lakes, like Navient, Mohila, some of those that actually do the servicing. They work with the student or the former student about repayment, help them with repayment plan options, and basically serve as that customer service front. Okay, let's see. If an institution, has a very poor cohort default rate, then obviously that is also, these are widely published. We're required for that information to be readily available to prospective students. If you were to see that an institution has a very high cohort default rate, you might wonder if what the school is charging and then the students are taking out in loans to pay for those charges, if those are sustainable by the wages made by those students after graduation. It also might make you wonder if those students are ever actually completing. So the cohort default rate can be a good indicator of quite a few things. Of course, there are students who they opt against advice, against their own best interest, to take out more loans than they could possibly need to have because they are worried, because the access to those funds, because of a whole host of other reasons. The overborrowing can make it very challenging when they enter repayment in order to have the funds available in whatever job they're doing to cover their other expenses and their student loan payments. Okay, so I am going to pass it over to Cicely. Cicely is our financial aid counselor, and she does a lot of the work directly with the students. She does the majority. Default prevention is one of those areas of financial aid that I have tasked her with handling, and she has just run with it beautifully and exceeded my expectations in how she reaches out to students and works with students both to prevent default and to assist students once they are at high risk of default. So I'm going to turn it over to Cicely.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So as Laura mentioned, default does impact our students quite a bit. When I'm working with students, I always try to urge students to only borrow what they need to help with unforeseen circumstances or the ability to pay back later on down the road. As you can see from looking at the slide, when a student goes into the default time frame versus just being delinquent, the consequences become more severe. The government can get involved and take away their wages. They can also take away individuals who are on Social Security, they can take up to 15% of those. They can garnish tax returns. That has a huge financial impact on a lot of students. I've noticed when I talk to students who are in default, there is a huge emotional weight. A lot of that emotional weight seems to be from the student failing. And because of the default, if a student is defaulted, they can't go into another semester and be able to utilize financial aid until the default is essentially taken care of and we have notification of that. And so the likelihood of that student being able to A, take care of the default, but B, finish their degree is very diminished. And so it causes a weight of feeling like they're failing. Not only are they feeling failure of not being able to pay their bills, but there's a failure of not being able to finish the educational journey that they started. When I did some research, I noticed that for students who are in default, about 32% of those students end up never going back to school because the weight that it carries within them. Depending on the type of the loan and even where a student lives, there are consequences in terms of their degree or even their license, specifically towards healthcare, which is what we have a lot of. A state can come in and put restrictions on a student's license. They can revoke that license. If a student lives in Kansas and then moves to another state, that state can choose to not renew their license or allow them to test for their license in that state. When loans are defaulted, it is reported to credit bureaus. As many of us know, credit bureaus are important because that score determines our eligibility for a car or for a house, even a credit card. And in a lot of cases now, it determines our eligibility for things we don't realize, such as car insurance or health insurance. And so it really has an impact all the way around, financially, emotionally, mentally. And it's so hard to get out of default because of the step-by-step process. We definitely do everything we can to keep students in more of a delinquent side if we have to than a defaulted side. So there's quite a few more actions than what we have listed that we take to prevent default. One of the great tools that we have is what we call Great Lakes Educational Loan Servicing. They have a tool called Portfolio Navigator. We do have a slide where I will be able to show you something similar that we send, but we're able to pull files directly from NSLDS, and we upload those files into the Great Lakes platform essentially. And they give us tools to be able to reach out to students, whether it's via the mail, via the phone, and via email. Prior to COVID, I was sending letters, I was placing phone calls, and I was sending emails. Unfortunately, with COVID, with everything being on hold, there's really nothing happening. And so it's harder to reach out to students. But with Great Lakes, there's essentially 4 platforms. There's an early delinquency, so students who are maybe behind just a couple of payments. There's a mid delinquency, students who haven't made a payment maybe in 90 to 120 days. There's a late delinquency status, which is for students who have not made a payment in up to 240 days. And then there's a high priority, which is students who are about 240 to 270 days past due or have not made a payment in 9 months. Great Lakes is able to identify those students and give me the guidance of speaking to them via the phone, wording the letters correctly, and the emails. I really enjoy Great Lakes, especially for the emails, because students do actually respond back. When students respond back to me, I do take the initiative because oftentimes they're scared or they really don't know what to do. We do a lot of conference calling, and so I will update the student on where they're at with their loan, who their loan servicer is, and we'll conference call their servicer together to make sure that A, they're getting in touch with someone, and B, they're able to understand everything that comes with being defaulted or missing those payments. One of the other things that I recently started doing is we have a graduation spreadsheet that we do every May and every December. on those graduation spreadsheets, any student who has applied for financial aid, they are required to do what's called exit counseling. And so we use that graduation spreadsheet to notify students of the requirement for exit counseling and track whether or not they've completed that. I know that for students who are graduating, they have a 6-month grace period. And so approximately 3 to 4 months after they've graduated, I will actually start reaching out to the students via phone or via email to see if I can't get in contact with them, or at least put on their radar that their loan is going to be coming due within a matter of a couple months. I try my best to call the students just so they have that friendliness, they have more of that customer service feeling. And then that way too, if we need to meet virtually or we need to meet face-to-face, we have that ability. But two, if the student wants to start making payments early, we can get them in touch with their loan servicer to start making payments early, or at least get them in touch with their loan servicer so they're aware of what their payment plan options are. And again, it just kind of puts it on their radar. So a couple of months when their loan servicer reaches out to them, they're not taken aback or they're not caught off guard because they owe or because they have that default in place.
Before we go to the next slide, I just want to touch back to something that Cicely mentioned. As part of the COVID relief by the federal government, student loan payments have been put on hold. Now it's been, almost a year that student loan payments have been put on hold. So that has slowed people being put into delinquency or default because they're not required to make those payments. So if you were wondering what she was just mentioning, that's what.
So this is one of the letters that we essentially would send out. This is a letter that is generated through Great Lakes Financial, which is who I was mentioning that we're able to work with on Portfolio Navigator and the tools that they provide us. Basically, it just tells them that their servicer has been trying to reach them. We have learned alongside them that they are behind on their loan payments. We let them know that we are here for them and that essentially, depending on their payment plan options, payments can be as low as $0. They can make payments by contacting their servicer. As you can see from looking at the letter, it does say that you can qualify to save 25% on your interest rate. And so we send this out to students. Emails are very similar in wording in terms of letting the student know that we can potentially possibly get them payments as low as $0 a month. We want to do everything that we can do to get them caught up, and that help is available. Oftentimes I get more response via email, and I take every opportunity I can when a student reaches out to me to give them the information, calm them down, help them understand, and again, pass them off to their loan servicer or conference with their loan servicer, just to give them that ease and kind of take away some of those emotional weights that they're feeling. So with this, Laura had discussed our cohort default rates. As you can see, this is our fiscal year 2016, fiscal year 2017, and fiscal year 2018. As Laura mentioned, we get a draft. Our draft comes in February, and then we get our actual cohort default rate, I believe, in September. So what you see for fiscal year 2018 is currently just our draft. For the current year, however, we are at 11.7%. So we are up a little bit, unfortunately, from 2016. However, the national average is 15%. We're definitely under that. And my goal is to continue to provide the customer service to drop it down even further.
I just want to stop for just a moment. If you could go back to that slide.
This one?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. One of the reasons that our financial aid office is presenting to you is to show you those results out of everything that they talked about their process. This is how it impacts our default rate. While it went up slightly from 16 to 17, as you can see from the draft, and hopefully that kind of remains the same, just doing default prevention things can certainly help because it helps, connect students with their servicers. And that is fantastic. Those are great rates.
It's also helpful when Cicely is discussing with them how much they actually need to take out and walking through their actual budget. That's very helpful in keeping the amount that we actually pay out in loans, or in that students take on in loans. It helps reduce that number as well.
Thank you. Sorry.
No, so my questions, perfect. Is the presentation towards the default rate of students, or is it the reimbursement to the institution of receiving this revenue?
It's the default rate, but go ahead.
We just wanted you to know more about the default rate. That is something that we know that the HLC looks at very, very closely, and it impacts our ability to exist as an institution. So I believe everybody wanted you to know more about the default rate and how that's calculated, and what actions we're taking to keep that as low as we can.
One of the things that the federal government could put into place if you have a very high default rate, as Laura mentioned earlier, is that you have to put up the cash for financing the financial aid. Currently, what we do is we do that, but we're able to draw those funds down immediately. So it's not really, it's maybe a day or maybe a week or so. With their cash management plan, you have to have those funds available to pay out financial aid. Sure. And so again, that can impact an institution.
But what I heard through that presentation is there's a segment of students that feel this anxiety of getting this stuff paid back.
Correct.
And the best way to do that is to get them jobs, to get them to start repaying that.
Two things on the front end, like they're doing, minimize how much they have to take out in loans, plus the good job.
Yes. Sure. And we also take those things into account when we look at tuition and fees and whether we're going to increase those. So not only are we doing the research to understand the Department of Labor data, the need in the area, if they're getting good jobs, but it's also about where they are, financially. So we take all of that stuff into account.
Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, but is it 20% default rate gets you on the radar?
Well, 30 is when it gets serious. 30 is over the course of 3 years is where there are sanctions.
Okay. And again, this has been a bigger bite at the for-profit colleges, some private colleges. Default rate hasn't been as significant with most public colleges, but not all. Some have had big problems.
Just so I'm clear, and Dave can probably answer this in the banking side, but the backing of the actual loans that the kids are taking out, the institution has zero liability. Like we're reimbursed 100%.
As a public institution, we're under the full faith and credit of the state.
And what the what's their name?
Great Lakes.
Great Lakes, their interest rates and all that stuff are par with the rest of the national average as far as what they're giving kids.
The interest rates are actually set by the Department of Education. Per legislation, it is a specific amount above prime on a specific day of the year, and then it's set for the next year. So no matter what student loan servicer you have, your interest rate is the same depending on the kind of loan. Parents take out a higher loan interest rate, but higher interest rate loan, but they're also not included in this calculation. So all the funds are backed by the federal government. There's federal taxpayers that are footing the bill for student loans. The students borrow it and then pay it back to the Department of Education via these student loan servicers that provide the servicing, the hands-on customer service. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Cicely. Great job.
Hey, Cicely.
Yes, sir.
You been to Pitty Pat's yet?
I have not.
You
Girl,
should go there, Cicely. It's delicious.
I've had some illness going on, and so I've stayed
Okay.
fast.
okay. Cicely works remote for us. She worked here. She had a chance to relocate in the Atlanta area. And we agreed to try the remote for a while to see how it worked out. It's worked fantastic. I think Laura would, she's nodding to it. And this was before COVID hit. But I wanted to thank both of them for making that work so well. But Cicely uses the technology, the phones, everything. And it's worked very well. So we've been able to keep a very good employee and keep our production the way we want in performance. So I want to thank both of them for making that happen.
I got a
Thanks for letting us.
side sort of question that there's legislation being debated about refunding 50% of tuition for
Yes.
classes that had to be taught online.
I was going to talk about that in a little bit.
Okay.
I had more fun scaring them earlier.
I can see it rippling through.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Question.
Okay, we're ready to move on.
Thank you, ladies. Again, good work.
Thank you. Have a good night.
And next we'll be moving on to the consent agenda. I have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I will move approval of the consent agenda.
Real quick, but last month we showed you part of criterion 1 from HLC. And we keep revising these. These are not final yet, but what she shared with you electronically, and we can pull it on the screen if we need to, but it's criteria 1 and 2, the drafts where we are with those. We actually have a group meeting on Friday this week to keep working on 2, but we continue to make progress on this. Sarah, Carmela, Kim Withroder, our institutional research person, is back. She's been on leave for a little bit. But what I want to say, the campus community, faculty and staff have been very good at working with us in the committee meetings, going through this, helping us think of things we might have overlooked that could be evidence, challenging us on some of our statements. So again, each month, you're going to keep seeing more and more of these drafts. And then in April, a good chunk of the board meeting is going to be going over the final assurance argument with you. Okay. Criterion 1 is on mission, pretty straightforward. Criterion 2 talks about governance. So it's one of those that you do need to take some time on. Much of it is about you and your role, our policy governance process. It does touch some on shared governance with the faculty. Again, we have faculty senate, and then shared governance with curriculum, professional development, and assessment.
We'll have to send it to them.
Okay, we'll send it to you. The evidence when we cite the policy governance manual will be the most latest version that we approved with revisions. And we take out some excerpts from that as we answer the criteria. So HLC doesn't expect you to be an expert in all 5 areas, but criterion 2, when you see that one, that's when we need to take a little time. It'll take you about an hour to read through it so that you're boned up on that. They're going to want to know what's our process to make sure you don't have a conflict of interest. That we aren't doing something we shouldn't be doing financially. It discusses the role I have with you and my role in running the college. Again, with the policy governance manual, it's that thing of ends versus means. So it's kind of a review session when you get that part. Okay. Pretty clear.
Okay.
Next up, Ms. Sarah.
Me? So we're still working on policies. What I'm bringing to you is the faculty senate policy, which is the final policy of our governance structure that we share with the faculty. The faculty senate worked a very long time going through this. It took us a little bit to go back to figure out what all pieces we had, but Brian worked with the faculty senate committee in regards to going through the whole policy, making sure that it follows our structure. So I'm bringing it forward kind of as an FYI that it's been fully updated and that this is what will be presented to, for HLC.
Brian or Jeff, anything you want to add?
I'd just like to commend everybody who's on faculty senate, because it was either 3 or 4 Fridays after 4 o'clock that we spent on this. And I think we spent a total of like 7 to 8 hours on it. We basically overhauled the whole thing. Everyone that was on faculty senate participated. It was productive, and I'll let Jeff talk, but I think as far as for me, this was probably the best amount of time that could have been spent getting this ready. So Jeff, if you want to chime in.
He might have stepped away. But we'll let him speak up when you have your Senate report a little bit too. Yeah, so you have one of the required reports as achievement of ends in your packet, related to 5 areas that are identified in the policy governance manual. And I'm reporting compliance in all of those. Again, our vision and mission, the Wamego Center, some stuff I'm going to update you on with the Career Academy. We keep making slow progress with Junction City, but we're getting there. The audit, again, we had a clean audit report. Wallet Help rankings, again, we're #1 in the state under their rankings. We were identified as one of the top 2-year colleges by the Aspen Institute. I think it's very safe to say more and more people in our community, in our service area, certainly in the state legislature and in the state regents, realize the impact of our mission. I think what's overlooked sometimes is our vision. And as you know, since I've been here, we're stepping on the gas almost every day. That vision is driving us as fast as we can. The only thing holding us back is resources. It's human resources, physical resources, and facility resources. On essential skills, again, you heard the report from the testing center folks. We've redesigned the assessment process. I think the work, faculty, and staff that were involved with that, it's been amazing. They've come up with a process where we get feedback much faster to them to help them close the loop. Of all the colleges I've worked with on assessment in my career, I'm really proud of this one in grasping that phrase, close the loop, in every committee, but especially with assessment. What's the value of doing this? What's it telling us? The Adult Learning Center, the production we've had there with the number of people we're helping. So again, essential skills were strong, very strong. Work preparedness, again, despite COVID, our job placement rate's way over 90%. It's essential occupations. They're getting the credentials. We're always looking for more credentials. Sarah's worked with the new mechatronics lab in Festo. We'll add even more credentials. She led the way on the welding with Lincoln Electric. Employers, I think Brett would agree, those industry credentials mean more than the college transcript.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Workforce development, the latest student success index came out by Cohort. I need to get you the link for that. Our success rate has improved by 9% over the past 7 years as far as students either staying in college or completing their program of study. Job placement rates high, salaries remain high. Our biggest issue, of course, is capacity of programs, depending upon what we need for teachers and lab space and equipment. That's what slows down enrollment as far as those programs. And then with leadership, just last week, PTK chapter was recognized for their membership development process and attained the REACH reward status. Skills USA, I think Neil's going to talk more about that in a little bit. They've been successful. The expansion of auto tech at the high school and how that keeps growing. Another good example, Wamego Center. So again, I think we're definitely have plenty of evidence about how we are achieving our ends. So, any questions, I'd be glad to answer, but I'm going to try to answer David's question and a few other things pretty quick here.
So tell me what you mean by PTK chapter. I'm not familiar with that.
It's Phi Theta Kappa. It's the honor society for 2-year colleges. We're one of the few tech colleges that have a chapter. It's pretty rare. And Brian helps lead that with others. COVID has impacted all of our student activity groups big time. Our students come here, they get their classes, their training, they leave, they often are going to work, taking care of family. For them to be involved in a club or organization is a definite extra step for many of them. But all of our leaders with Skills USA, that is a skills competition of students in technical skills and soft skills. Frank Avila leads that in HVAC. PTK, you have to meet certain academic requirements, but then they have community service requirements that are involved as well. We have a veterans organization with students. I'll put Neil on the spot because he's kind of been overseeing a lot of this. Yeah, I see that smile. But like I said, we keep pushing it, but I think Neil and Brian will attest to the fact COVID has slowed the engagement of students to a standstill.
Yeah, would you like me to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, why don't you?
Yep. So like Jim talked about, we have a couple student organizations on campus, Student Veterans Association, Phi Theta Kappa, Skills USA, Student Activities Council, and the Student Voice Council. If I missed one, I'm sorry, but I think I got them all. So quite a few on campus. Skills USA currently is right now probably one of our more active memberships on campus, just because of COVID and some of those components. We're having kind of issues as everyone is nationally and having involvement personally on campus with our students. They're kind of here siloed and then kind of go home after that, or some of them are virtual, and some of those components and engaging them while they're on campus has proved a little bit difficult and unique. So we're trying to figure out different and unique ways to maybe target the students and reach out to them to get them actively involved in some of those areas and avenues. But Skills USA, I know that Jim briefly mentioned it, but they competed in district here a few weeks back and were recognized in a couple different areas. They received gold within, it was, you put me on the spot, Jim, now I'm gonna forget. It was gold in medical math by one of our nursing students who is a participant in Skills USA. And then Skills USA also participated in the first ever Quiz Bowl. And they ended up receiving the silver in that. And we should be having state come up. It will be unique, as probably Frank, the advisor of that organization, can say, because it's all going to be virtual. So there's a lot of components to that the IT team and myself and Frank as the advisor will be looking to figure out how we can do some of those events on campus virtually from that standpoint. But definitely wanted to highlight obviously Phi Theta Kappa and their achievement, as well as Skills USA and their achievement in regards to gold and silver at districts. So.
HLC does look at this kind of activity. They call it co-curricular assessment. And so that's another part of our assessment process. Let's talk about the Regents and the Legislature. So last week, the House Appropriations Committee met, and I had testified to their higher ed committee earlier. I've also testified to Senate Ways and Means higher ed committee. And the community college testimony and our testimony was pretty much in alignment to go for full funding of Excel and CTE, the program where we do the high school students. The proposed cut by the governor was about 17%, and we're not getting paid what we should now for that. It's a reimbursement under state law. We're supposed to be reimbursed for our costs. We haven't been. And I must say the members of the House Higher Ed Committee got it real quick as Heather and I talked to them. And when they gave their report to the full Appropriations Committee last week, what the Appropriations Committee adopted was not only full funding, but also that we get paid 50% of what is owed halfway through the semester instead of waiting until the end of the semester. That came out of nowhere from one of the legislators. And that same legislator then talked about a child of his attending a state university in engineering and what happened when COVID hit and the lack of education that child received, but the cost never went down. There was a pile on from other members of the committee, and when the committee was through, they adopted an amendment, and it was adopted by the full appropriations committee last week. The media has not been accurate in reporting it. It does not apply to the two-year colleges at this time. I'll add that we could get stuck with it, but I don't think we will. It applies only to the state universities. And what they are, if it goes through, they have to do a 50% tuition, not fee, tuition refund for any class that was face-to-face and went online. And a 100% tuition refund for any class that did not meet the seat time it was supposed to meet. I will say this legislature is very anti-university. And that's not good. We need K-State to be healthy. We need all the state universities to be healthy. Some of the presentations by people from the universities, it's not at the presidential level, it's when other people sometimes get involved making presentations, it's not helping their case. They are faced with a 5.5% budget cut across the board. They're getting little support about deferred maintenance or anything else. The two-year college sector is, the legislature's kind of separated us away from universities. And I will say, the more I've either done testimony or today I was down there, the tech colleges are on a much higher pedestal right now with most of the legislature than any other segment of higher ed. But let me repeat, we do not need the universities to get beat up too bad. That's not good, especially for this community. The Senate Ways and Means Committee is still working on their recommendation. We want them to mirror the House as far as Excel and CTE. If they say the same language when they take appropriations to conference committee, if each House has said the same thing, that doesn't go to conference, it's just accepted. So that's what we're working on now. Last week, our lobbyist, Steve Kearney, got hold of me and said, I need to know if you can run down here next Tuesday at 3:30. I said, great. He said, I need you in the room. And it was the House Taxation Committee. And for you new members of the board, what we've been talking about for about 2 years with the legislature, and we were making some progress last year and then COVID hit, was tax credit legislation. Several years ago in Kansas, all of higher ed was extended a tax credit proposal by the legislature. When I came to Neosho County, when I came back to Kansas, it was in the last part of the program. What we're proposing is built off of that, but we proposed it only for the technical colleges. And what we're asking for is each college to be allowed to accept donations up to $500,000 a year for capital outlay projects and be able to do a dollar for dollar match as a tax credit to the donor, whether it's an individual or a business. The initial capital outlay appropriation by the state for the VOTEX was in 1974. Some people in this room don't remember that year because they weren't around then. That was the year I graduated high school. That was pre-Star Wars coming out. The appropriation in 1974 was $2 million. The appropriation by the legislature for capital outlay, which applies to the tech colleges and to, I think, 9 community colleges that have tech programs. The appropriation for fiscal year 2021 was $2.5 million.
No inflation.
If you allow for inflation, it should be 11 million. You get roughly 170,000 a year.
We get 130,000 a year, but we
130,000.
have to match it 50%, so about 200,000 every year.
But from the state, we get 130,000 a year for capital outlay. I could put Brett on the spot. That doesn't go too far in any construction project, does it?
Too much.
Yeah. So, like I said, we've been working the legislators on this. The chair of the House Taxation Committee is Adam Smith from out in Western Kansas. I don't know if any of you know Representative Smith, good guy. He's got the great name for Texas because Adam Smith was the founder of capitalism, if you remember your history. And I had a chance to meet him a couple of years ago when we had the presidency out at Northwest Tech. That's his territory. Before the meeting, Steve and I met with Ron Highland from Wamego, and he's very supportive of this. He also, for those of you, in case you run into him, he has a soft spot in his heart for adult ed. So I always hit him with that, but I gave him one of the booklets we have about the Wamego Center today. We also met with Dave Baker, a member of the House from Council Grove, who's on the committee.
He's doing all right. He's a good friend of mine.
Well, and he's loving us.
Good.
He was very supportive in the conversation we had. Then Steve texted me a little bit ago. He hung around after the meeting and talked with Representative Gartner, who's the ranking minority member on the committee. And he said, yeah, but we hit a home run today. And the community colleges testified first, asking to be included in the proposal. And they had reached out to me last week about that. And I said, I'm not going to oppose it, but. And so Steve and I met before the hearing, and they asked, and Heather, the community college lobbyist, is a friend of mine. We talk several times a week. They asked her how much property tax money do the community colleges get statewide, because they have taxing authority, and she didn't have the answer. And so, stinker me, I gave the answer when I gave my testimony, because I know they get about 250 million a year among the 19 community colleges under taxing authority. The 7 tech colleges get 0. 2 years ago, the state appropriation for the 7 tech colleges combined, this is not capital outlay, this is the total appropriation for us, for all 7 tech colleges combined, was just over $21.5 million. That represented 28% of our total revenue. The state funding formula says the tech colleges should get 2/3 of their funding from the state, 1/3 from students. It's the reverse that happens. When you look at the economic impact that we had done 2 years ago, the 7 tech colleges combined economic impact for 1 year, this is every year it's growing, $380 million. So off that 21 million, that's a return of 17 times the amount. I said, I challenge any component of higher ed to show me they're better than that. Now, are we going to get what we're asking for? That I don't know. They're a little concerned about a dollar for dollar tax credit. When this program was in effect in 2008 through 2013, it was 60% for the 2-year colleges, 50% for the universities. They're not about to extend this to the universities. I did ask them today to not dilute what we're asking for. If they want to help the community colleges, fine, but don't dilute what we're asking for. We're asking for 5 years of this, $500,000 per year per tech college. That would be $3.5 million over the 5 years. I have talked to several accountants and some other folks in town who said, if this goes through, let us know, because we know people who will want to help get that tax credit and help you.
Is there a way, Jim, for that to be limited to just Riley County or just impacting communities so that it is earmarked more for that vocational institution rather than just trying to get outside dollars into the university?
Well, this, again, what we're asking for doesn't apply to anything but the tech colleges.
Right.
And my sense from the committee today, I don't think they're going to let the community colleges in. I think it's just going to be for the tech colleges. We can raise it from anywhere in the state. It's not limited to our service area as far as getting the donation. There is also legislation from people in Douglas County about the Peasley Center. Peasley Center, I helped develop part of it when I was at Neosho. It's their answer for a tech college because KU provided no tech ed. But the Peasley Center is done more on non-credit and apprenticeship than they have with college credit tech ed. They have a proposal in the legislature that seems to be getting some traction, and it's to give them a certain designation so they are eligible for Douglas County tax monies. It's not taxing authority, but it's to allow Douglas County to support them. Steve is watching that because he thinks that may be a breakthrough for each of the tech colleges to push that in our home counties.
Right.
And if we could get it at least for capital outlay, it would be a huge help. It would be, operating funds would even be better, but capital outlay is so critical for what we need. Now, on top of all that, this week is the TEA meeting, and the agenda packet came out yesterday. I'll get this sent to you electronically. Every year they do the gap because none of the colleges hardly are totally paid what we're owed by the state. They don't change our basic operating fund appropriation grant. This year it is approximately what, 2.4 million? 2.1. Down here. So we get our funding outside of Excel and CTE. Our funding is based from the state on tiered and non-tiered courses. Tiered courses are tech courses like construction trades. There's a lab. Non-tiered are gen ed courses, English, speech, sciences. Okay. The total gap on non-tiered, on general ed, if you will, funding, the gap is almost $15 million. Because the current way this is administered by the Regents, I could grow by 500 students. Are we going to get a nickel more?
No,
I could drop by 500 students. Are we going to get a nickel less?
no. Does not
It's the
change.
most whacked out thing of all. Cowley Community College has been overpaid because their gap is in red with parentheses. I believe that means negative numbers.
Yes, sir.
They have been overpaid over $1.5 million. We are underpaid $500,000. Wichita Tech, between tiered and non-tiered, are underpaid over $6 million. Almost every community college is overpaid on tiered funding. The tiered funding gap is $8.5 million. 60% of that is owed to 5 technical colleges, including us. I'm going to raise hell at the TEA this week. Then part of the TEA is also the state's K-tip report. This is their training report, which looks basically at Perkins on majors, concentrators, completers, graduates, and salaries. On average wage of graduates who have exited and are employed, we're 5th in the state for average wage. We're 2nd among the technical colleges, but they'll beat us out by about $1,500. On median wage, we're number 1. We're way above everybody. Again, it's all about that impact we're having. But this is starting to resonate more and more with the legislature. Both Ron Highland and the rep from Council Grove said, you guys are the hot thing. If we're going to build the state up, we need more tech ed. So if you know any of these people, please tell them to support what the tech colleges are asking for. We need Excel and CTE. We need this tax credit. Adam Smith said, you want the tax credit for 5 years. You don't want it beyond that. Or I said, we want it for 5 years. Then we're going to come back and say, here's what we did with it. We're going to show you the impact. Combine that with what I'm going to tell you next. So Wamego Center, we're working today. We work on how we can get our final financial report, if you will, on phase 1, where we are now. Then we got estimates from BBN for phase 2, which is completing the 2nd building to put in the science labs, computer lab, and auto technology. We're not even talking the 3rd building yet, where we want to do welding and construction trades. Starting Thursday, Harry and I are going to start meeting with business people and individuals in Wamego to start planting the seeds, because we have that challenge money from the Manhattan Community Foundation. Last Friday, Marvin Wade, the Manhattan superintendent, came out and met with Sarah and I, and he's got a lot on his plate, as you know, but he said to us, you guys push, we got to push the Career Academy. It's time to push it. Odds are, again, the 9th grade center, it's not set in stone. That's what we're looking at, but we have basically 26 months. He plans on the 9th graders being out of there by the fall of 23. So I'm developing a reverse timeline to share with him so we can go to his board, come back to you, and then start meeting with that executive build committee we had with the planning grant the chamber, et cetera, on how we're going to build this career academy concept. As we've discussed, depending upon what we put there, that may open up space here that again, then we look, how do we use that space here? Plus we have the concept building from BBN that would replace 4 of the modulars. Get what I'm telling you? Harry and I met with Lyle Butler a couple of weeks ago. Harry's wanting to help. Lyle wants to help. Brent Bowman wants to help. They're seeing what they did with the downtown redevelopment, revitalization. They're seeing that for us. If we can get this tax credit thing through, it makes it a little easier. And again, we're doing things, and you heard like the testing center, we're getting people from Omaha and Great Bend. We're doing things to build what I want to build, which is we become Mid-America Technical College. With that, I'll stop talking for a minute and see if you have comments or questions, or if any of the crew that are still on want to throw things at me.
I think it's important just to see some numbers here on the regional testing centers, what they brought up. If that's obviously kudos to that group for the percentages of gains, but how does that equate into dollars generated into the college?
I'm gonna put myself
For next month.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I think in the first quarter of the fiscal year, somebody throw out a number, we made 7,000.
7,000.
And again, it's taken time to do that. It would be great if it can become self-sustaining. I think if we combine that with some ideas we've been talking about on how we can get more aggressive on grants on our foundation side, we're moving toward that to get those investors we need. The ideas with the Greater Manhattan Economic Partnership, the chambers in Wamego and Manhattan in particular, I think they know more than ever. It's a win-win if it's K-State and us both growing. That's what sets our region apart from a lot of parts of the state. So we'll try to get you some more numbers. Fine then. Okay, Chris.
Hi, everybody. As I mentioned last month, my reports are just going to start getting less and less interesting as we wind down the Title III project. Last week, the annual performance review was finally released, so I can start filling all that out. I have been working on the draft, and a lot of good news is already coming in from that one. All of our objectives and performance indicators were met. I'm just gathering all the evidence for that. One I did want to share that is really cool. One of our objectives for year 4, so this was fall of 2019 through summer of 2020. We just needed, one of the objectives was to have 76% of students receiving a C or better in all hybrid and online classes. And the data that we pulled last week indicates that 86% of students had a C or better. So that's really encouraging, and that's definitely something we want to elaborate on, because it does also include kind of the beginnings of the COVID pandemic for us. I will have a draft of the APR done probably in the next week or two and sent to Ramona Munsels and our consultants for Title III. They'll help me just review it, make it better. And then once I submit it, I will have that to you. I can't guarantee it'll be next month. It's due April 23rd. My goal is to have it done by the end of March, just so it's off my plate, because I also have adult ed continuation grant application due around the same time. So I want to try and get started on that here in a few weeks as well. Other than that, just kind of making sure the ship's heading in the right direction.
Good. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Mhm. Well, I don't have much to report. As I mentioned earlier, I have been working remotely out of this state for the past 3 weeks, so I definitely missed your freeze of Kansas, which I was happy with. But upon returning yesterday, actually I returned today. The only update I would provide is that as we mentioned last time, our Wamego facility, we did phase 1 of the building 2, as Jim just mentioned, and we're now talking about phase 2 of building 2. But if you have the opportunity to be in Wamego, to stop by to take a look at it, I encourage you to do so. Our maintenance team they're actually renovating the bathrooms. That's one thing in building 1 that we did not have done. So we were able to do that ourselves.
There's nothing wrong with shag carpet.
There is something wrong with carpet in a bathroom. It's just odd. So we are remodeling that. And so hopefully by the time you are able to visit the center, that will be finished. However, if you get the opportunity, so.
AIB.
Oh, yes. Well, that was actually something for you. AIB International reached out to Jim.
So remember, they reached out to us a couple years, 2 years ago, whenever it was, when they were going to move, about, did we want the property? Well, yeah, but couldn't afford it. They've been selling their furnishings. We bought some, but they got in touch with us a few days ago, got in touch with me. And so we're sending a crew out to see what they have left. They've offered whatever they have left, they can have it, donate it. So we're going to see how that might help us, because they had some good stuff.
Yes. Science tables, and that would work
Yeah.
well in our classrooms.
I think I mentioned Dee McKee, County Commissioner of Pot County, and Jack Alston came over to the center. Tim Winter did. Sarah, why don't you talk about Tim's email back to you about he's bringing some people in a couple of weeks.
Actually, he's bringing people Thursday morning.
Okay. Hey, I've been busy.
2 weeks has gone by, you just didn't know it.
Yeah, one of the snow days that they took, I was at the center and Tim reached out and said, hey, I'm not doing anything. Can I come look? And I'm like, yeah. So Tim Winters and his assistant superintendent came by. They thought we were just doing the first building. And then when we went in the second building and showed them the clinic and everything, they were real impressed with what we had done, because that wasn't something that they thought was happening. And so his assistant superintendent reached out this week and said, hey, I have some faculty and counselors that I'm taking to CanEquip for a tour about their business. Can we stop by the center? And I'm like, I'll be there. So anybody who wants to go, I try to make sure I'm there. Tim reached out at one point. He was off. Wanted to see. And
we have
so
a full day over there Thursday.
yeah, so we're trying to get people in there as much as we can. We've got occupancy, so they can come in, but there's still parts under construction, so we're trying to be careful, but yep, it's coming along. Now to get more classes.
If we were to go visit over there, would we check into the main building first?
Yeah,
Government building.
come in with the back door. Yeah, we're leaving the front doors locked right now. Tuesdays and Thursdays, there's definitely people there all day now.
Okay.
We've got a couple of staff members that are there all day. Mine's kind of random, but with me living in Wamego, if you want to come by, just holler. I'll come up and give you guys a tour anytime. Anytime.
Okay.
If you come Thursday morning, I'll be starting class at 8:10. You're more than welcome.
I would advise against that because he's going to ask you math questions.
Remember, math is a 4-letter word.
Every time we evaluate him, he tries to put me on the spot in front of his students.
All right, Mr. Ross, COVID update and anything else in student services?
Yep, so COVID, I am happy to report right now, we're sitting at 0 active cases on our campus. Have been that way for about a week and a half. I hope that by saying this on the live broadcast, I'm not going to jinx myself. But no, it's been pretty good since January. We have set at 11 actually active cases, where a student either had to isolate or quarantine, either by self-quarantine while they're undergoing testing or something of that nature. So better, I would say, than the fall semester. So we're under kind of that percentage of where we're at this time last semester, but obviously don't want to let our guards down, remain vigilant with all of our cleaning measures, safety measures that we have in place, etc. So that's kind of the brief COVID update. Jim did want to let me know why we've displaced you guys today. Obviously, my oversight that Mary luckily